Welcome back to Cycling Unboxed, and today I'm going to be doing a comparison between the brand new Sram Red versus the Shimano 12-speed Dura-Ace. This bike here specifically is actually just the Ultegra version. It's just a stand-in for the Dura-Ace, which I have more than enough miles on. But essentially in this video, what I'm going to be doing is I'm going to be scoring these against each other. So I've got a bunch of different categories, which you can see in the chapters below. And essentially the winner of each category is going to gain 1 point. If they draw, they're going to gain half a point. But I think on some of these categories, I'm going to take a bit of liberties as well. Let's see what the final scores are at the end. Then I'm going to choose which group set I would choose to put on my own bike if I'm buying another bike in the future. Before we do start, I would like to say that I'm going to be very nitpicky in this video because I think to compare the two, they're both such excellent group sets, you have to be a bit nitpicky. So be ready for that. Alright, let's kick it off with hood feel. So how comfortable are the hoods to use when you're cycling? And this one is going to be easy. It's a draw between the two. If it's between the current Shimano and the previous Sram Red, the current Shimano would have won. The hoods are excellent, but these updated models that they've done, very impressive. They're very comfortable, lots of positions for your hands to be in. They feel a lot better, and well, they look a lot better, which we'll talk about the aesthetics later. But to me, I couldn't choose between the two on this one. I'm just as comfortable on both personally. Also on the comfort front, I find the SRAM is very nice to have the ability to get all of your fingers underneath there. It's really good. And the brake lever is so accessible from all of those locations, from all of your main fingers. But when you go back to the Shimano here, it just feels a little bit more claustrophobic underneath the hood. Having that extra space is really nice when you're holding onto it. Now, of course, this does increase the length of the hood. So for a lot of riders, people don't want to be increasing their reach. The SRAM will increase the reach for you. Whereas other people, maybe you want that increased reach and it's going to benefit your bike position. So I think in terms of hand space on the hoods, the SRAM is definitely going to win that one. But I'm only going to give it half a point just because, like I said, it does change your position on the bike. Maybe you need to buy a shorter stem. And if you've got a one-piece bar and stem, that gets very expensive. Next up, the aesthetics, one that shouldn't matter, but we all like our bikes to look good. And I think if you're trying to go for more like a sleeker, more blackout, stealthier look, then Shimano would be the way to go. But let's be quite honest here. This new Sram Red looks fantastic. It's just a bit more glitzy, it's a bit more shiny, and there's something about these brake calipers that I just love. The brake calipers look amazing on this bike. I love how you can see the carbon, the chopped carbon on the shifter, whereas the Dura-Ace, it just looks plain black. It's a little bit boring. And I think there's just something about the shifter hood shape on this new Sram Red that just gives it this really nice overall aesthetic. It just looks a little bit racier to me. Okay, braking quality. So before I talk about the braking quality, I think both of these group sets have fantastic braking power. The force that they both put through and the stopping power that they have is amazing on both of them. But I can now say SRAM takes the top on this one. The lever feel, the lever action is lighter than the Shimano. It feels easier to pull that lever back. Not only that, it actually feels like the piston is less sticky when the shifter is returning back to its original position. It just feels like a lighter action. Thirdly, I would say there is more modulation with the SRAM. You just have that little bit more control over how much power you're putting through the brakes. Like, it's not like the Shimano is bad whatsoever. You have loads of control and loads of modulation. But I think the SRAM feel is better for that. Let's move on to shifting quality, and I'm going to talk about the front derailleur first. Now, I know in the past SRAM have always had some issues of change dropping and stuff. I haven't actually heard of it much on the new version, but if you have had problems with it, please do let me know. I will say SRAM have managed to really improve their front derailleur shifting here. It feels like it hooks up quicker. It feels like that derailleur moves over faster. For that faster hookup, it feels a bit crisper, but the win still has to go to Shimano on this one for the front derailleur shifting. I'm going to overlay some B-roll right now at just how fast the front derailleur shifts on here. It's literally insanely quick. It's so impressive. And if you just compare that to the B-roll of the SRAM here, it's just a little bit slower, a little bit more sluggish. I know you don't normally shift like this on a front derailleur, but I think it demonstrates the speed of the shift very well. And I will say, when you're shifting up or down on the Shimano, it really does hook up almost instantly. It's fantastic. In some ways, it's almost like the previous generation of rear derailleur. It's that fast. Okay, shifting on the rear derailleur, the one that you use a lot more often. And once again, I feel like the SRAM system here really has improved from their previous generation. It feels quicker, it feels smoother, it hooks up faster, it feels crisper, and the word I'll describe, it feels less clunky than their previous generation. Their previous gen, to me, felt a little bit clunky going from gear to gear, but it has got much better on this new SRAM Red. And I would say close to the Shimano, but honestly, the Shimano, to me, it is smoother, it's faster still, it feels less clunky still. I still think the SRAM Red has a little bit of clunk to it, and I also feel like I can pedal at higher powers on the Shimano. And if you don't quite, just every now and then, if you don't quite time it, or you're going up a really steep hill and you just need to get that gear up, it just shifts a lot smoother than it does on the SRAM. So the win still has to go to Shimano here. But I will give SRAM a 0.25 because I think they've done really well at improving that on their side of things. Look at it this way, guys. It's close. It's very close. Alright, what about the button feel? You are pressing them a lot and all of the time, and I'll give it to, I'm not giving the points to SRAM here, but one thing I will give them is that it feels very mechanical. So it feels like you're moving levers and shifting things, almost like you're shifting gears on a mechanical car. In an old school car, it feels like you're moving things around, and it's quite nice. But let me know if this goes over time. I think the actual force required to press this SRAM button, it feels like the spring pushing it back is quite firm. Like I said, this might loosen up over time, so let me know in the comments below if it does, because this one's quite new. It's barely done 500 kilometers. But the force you have to press to get that button pressed, it's almost a little bit too heavy in my mind, whereas the Shimano has a much lighter feel. It doesn't feel like you'll ever press it accidentally, but it's much lighter, and the throw of the button is shorter, so it feels like you're pressing the button earlier on the throw, but it doesn't feel like I have to push the button as far in on the Shimano, and it has a lighter button feel, so it feels easier to use it more often. So I think button feel has to go to Shimano here. Okay, what about the locations of the buttons? And SRAM obviously have a new one. They have the thumb shifter now, just like Shimano have it on top of the hood there. And for that extra button, the location of the SRAM one is, it's much better than the Shimano one. When you're dropped down in that aero position, it's fairly awkward to lift the thumb and press the top of the hood. The location of the button when you're in the aero bars here, you kind of want to sit with your hands on top. You know, you want to feel stable on there, but you have to lift off and press the button to do it and then go back on top. That's just how I like to see it. Whereas the SRAM, you can literally be on here and use your thumb. It's like your thumb is already in the correct place when you're in the aero position to press this button. When you're on top of the hoods on the SRAM here, it's actually in a slightly awkward place. It feels like I have to use the inside knuckle of my thumb to press it, which is fine. Otherwise, it's quite awkward to press it with the tip of your thumb when you're shifting. But like I said, I feel like it's more designed. You're always going to use the bottom shifters down here instead of using the top shifters up here, unless you're in the aero position. So I think the SRAM has to win that section. So it's going to get a 0.25. But for me, there's a really big letdown here on SRAM. The location of their main button, the one you're going to be using all the damn time, is too far back. I quite literally almost have to wrench my finger backwards to press the button all of the time. And I can tell you, for the times that I have ridden this, after about 2 hours, I've started to get some pain along the top of my wrist. It's not bad pain, but just some light uncomfortableness on top of the wrist just from pressing the buttons. And I found myself wanting to shift less because I have to pull back so far to press the button. You can, of course, adjust the reach on this, and you can put the reach further out or the lever throw further forward. But for me, if I do that, then the braking lever goes too far forwards and the braking position is in the wrong position. So I feel like it's more of a hazard than it is anything else. So I want the button further round to the front of the shifter. Whereas the Shimano here, I barely have to move my finger and it's in the perfect place. When you have to pull your finger back too far, you kind of lose strength in that finger, so it feels even harder to press the button. But with the Shimano, I just lift my fingers up a little bit, and then the finger itself is in a strong position to press the buttons. So unfortunately, because of that one reason, the Shimano button location has to win. It's just in too much of an awkward place on the SRAM. And like I said in the intro, we're nitpicking here, so it's important. Alrighty, let's talk power meters. Because if you're buying the top end models, it bloody well should come with a power meter. Thank you, SRAM. Done a good job there. Shimano, a lot of the Dura-Aces don't come with a power meter, and when they do come with a power meter, the stock Shimano power meters are rubbish. If you look at any YouTubers' videos like DC Rainmaker, GP Llama, all of their testing on the stock Shimano power meters, they're so out of whack, they're so inaccurate, and they're so inconsistent. They're terrible. So Shimano, you need to sort out your power meters, man. Especially if it's coming stock with a bike, especially if you've got it stocked on so many pro teams as well, and they don't work that well. The SRAM, of course, SRAM bought Quark, and I think the Quark power meters are amazing. Instead of in the cranks like the Shimano one, it is in the spider body of the crank, and I think this means like side to side might not be as accurate, like left and right power, but essentially I think the overall power to me seems a bit more reliable, and from the testing it seems a lot more reliable. I've also personally had some of the crank-based Shimano power meters fail on me as well, whereas I know every single person that has a Quark power meter never failed. Let me know in the comments below if that's not been the case for you, but to me and to the people that I know, these Quark-based power meters seem absolutely bulletproof. Battery setup, and I know what one you think I'm going to say here, but it's not SRAM, and neither is it Shimano. It's a dead tie, half a point each. Let me explain why. I know some of you are going to get angry at me here. For me, I really love just plugging it into one place and it charges everything up in one go. In some ways it's kind of simpler. Also, I find with the one battery on the Shimano it lasts longer than the SRAM one, so I have to charge it up a lot less frequently. It just feels like everything's in one place. I just have to plug it into the rear derailleur, front's done, don't have to worry about it. With the SRAM you got to take off 2 batteries. Now I know you can just buy more charging ports, but just feels like I have to do more work with SRAM when I have to charge the batteries up. Not only that, you've got the batteries in the hoods, which I know the newest generation of Shimano has as well, which is why my personal favourite is the previous generation Shimano, the 11-speed, where it was all wired up. I know it's more of a pain to set up, but once you are set up, you just had one location and you charged everything in one go. Now I know the argument in the comments is coming, but Jason, if your rear derailleur runs out of battery, then you could just put the front battery on the back. Yes, that's a very good point. If your batteries are running low, you can definitely almost always guarantee that you've got some sort of shifting on the rear. It's still a pain, and I think nowadays, especially if you're buying the top end models, this is a non-issue because both of the brands connect to your head units, so you can see how much battery that you have left in each of them, so you know when you need to charge them. Honestly, I don't know anyone that runs the top end models that's run out of battery whilst out on a ride. On some of the lower end models where people are less experienced and don't know to check their battery levels too often, definitely seen that. I would just rather charge up less often. But honestly, this one is definitely personal preference, so I'm just going to give it half a point each. It's a draw. What about setting the bike up? Which one's easier to set up on the bike? And well, it has to be SRAM. Just because you don't have the internal frame battery, you only have the brake cables to do now. So once you've got them threaded, you're pretty much done. Whereas the Shimano, you have to get the battery somewhere, down tube, seat tube, and then you have to run a bit more cables. Although, once again, I don't think it's that hard to set up personally. But if we had to give a point to one, Shimano did get better having the wireless shifter hoods. It makes it easier to set up, but then you also have to think about having more batteries around as well. What about maintenance? Which one's easier to maintain? I'm going to need a little help from the comments this time. I've only ever had to maintain the Shimano setups, and honestly, like, bleeding these is no problem. It's definitely better than their previous generation 11-speed. In terms of brake bleeding, I've never had to brake bleed SRAM, so if you are a mechanic or you've had to brake bleed both, which one do you think is easier to do? I can't give a point either way because it's not my place to judge. I do also find for both of these group sets that pulling back the shifter hoods, the rubber and stuff, much better than the previous generations. They used to be quite tough and hard. If you wanted to get a hex wrench behind here to adjust the lever angle and stuff like that, they're both much easier. They're much more supple rubber now on both of these. Sweat. Now, not everyone is like me, but I know many of you are. I'm a profuse sweater. I sweat so much on the bike, especially on a hot climb. Now, as you know, sweat's quite slippy, but which one wins? SRAM. SRAM definitely wins on this one. So the Shimano, as soon as it gets wet, this shifter hood becomes so slippery. You can see it's literally just smooth. So it's perfect. It's got so much grip when it's dry, but as soon as it's wet, as soon as you're working hard, the surface just becomes so slippery, and you are absolutely relying on these ridges that sit on the side here. Now there's loads of them and they do hold your hand on just fine, but you are relying on them alone. Whereas the SRAM, if you look closely, the actual hood here has more of like a matted texture. So I find when you're sweaty, you do still have grip on that hood, but not just that, it feels like it has more flow channels for that water to get away on, whereas the water kind of just holds and sits, essentially glazes the Shimano surface where it doesn't glaze the SRAM. And not only that, the shifter hood design helps here as well, because you can get the whole hand underneath it. It just makes it so much easier to grip onto it, whereas this one I find it's 3 fingers, and when you're really sweaty, sometimes you just feel like you want that extra finger just underneath just to grip onto those hoods when you're at the last stages of the climb and you're just putting the power down as hard as you can. So yeah, for those my sweaty hands friends, SRAM wins this one. It has got more grip and it's easier to hold on to when you're sweating. Okay guys, I'm going to put the scores, Shimano on this side, SRAM on this side, right here for you, so you can see which one scores the highest. But you can also use that information to form your own opinions as well between the 2 group sets. Which one would I choose? Now you're probably thinking from the scores, maybe the SRAM, but honestly, that button position, how far back it is and how much I have to reach and the increased force to push it, I hate it. I really hate it. Just having the buttons in so much more of an accessible location, just lift your finger, it's just like a lighter tap. It just feels like it's so much easier just to shift on this bike, and it is crisper, it is smoother, it is sharper, and I think it's quicker, the shifting on the Shimano. SRAM has so many good things. I love the way it looks, there's no denying it's the best looking group set out there at the moment. It's beautiful. But in terms of functionality, for the way that my hands are shaped, I don't like the button position on this one, and it essentially has forced me into using this one more. I'm sure that's not what a lot of people want to hear, so there's my winner. Sorry SRAM. I personally am still going to go for Shimano. If you got that button in a better position and a lighter action on it, I think I might have gone for this. Anyway guys, what do you think? Do you think I'm wrong? Do you think I just have weird shaped hands that don't like the SRAM buttons? Let me know if you disagree or agree in the comments below. And if you have any further questions, you can also message me in the comments below. Or you can find me over here on Instagram, where you can message me privately. I reply to most things. But I've been Jason, this has been Cycling Unboxed. I'll see you in another video.